that Babylon isn't going to win. It's not going to win the day. What'll happen is that God's way, his kingdom, actually wins. It's a reversal of all of the things that we see in the world today, the power structures, those who want to take from others. That's what empires do. They take from you. And those who stay faithful to the kingdom of God are the people that will actually, in the end, be victorious. Hi, welcome to Whiskey and the Writings. My name is Joe. I'm your host today. And on this episode, we're talking about the Apocalypse of John. If you've been reading this writing that's also known as Revelation in your Bibles to try to understand the future or to foretell events that may be coming up politically in our world today, you're probably reading this writing incorrectly. This isn't about the future. This is about who's on the throne. And today we're going to introduce a way of reading Revelation, the Apocalypse of John, that maybe you've never considered before. And so I'm excited to talk about this. This is a part 2 in the series. So if you missed the introduction, go back to last week's episode, check that one out, and then come back to this one. There's a lot of themes that we're going to be building on that I laid a foundation in the last video. So this is the Apocalypse of John, part 2, reading Revelation as a chiasm. Let's get started. Okay, today we're drinking a McKenna Henry. This is a 10-year bottled in bond. This is a great sipper whiskey that you don't want to move quickly through. It's not a mixer. You just want this thing neat. You want it straight, and you just want to sip on it next to a fire where you're thinking deeply. And so, since we're kind of doing that today on this episode, I thought it'd be a great whiskey to feature on this episode. I'm also drinking out of my wood cup that was a gift from my dear friend Caleb. I shared this cup a little while back, a couple videos back, but this is what I'm drinking out of today. So whatever you have in front of you, pour your drink and drink responsibly. Let's dive right in. Cheers. Okay. I got a few things in front of me. They're going to help me work through this. One, I got my computer up here with some notes. I've also got paper I'll introduce here in a second. I got my iPad. I got my Bible because we're going to be doing some work here on this episode of walking you through this concept. So let me lay some groundwork, some foundation to this thought. Again, you can go back to part 1 and catch a little bit more in detail on my thoughts on what this writing is. But essentially, the whole concept behind this is that Revelation isn't meant to be read to tell us about something that is future telling, i.e., we look at the politics of our day and we try to decipher who the Antichrist is, or the beast, and all of these kind of like what power structures are warring against each other, and we can look for those little hints in our modern political system, and then we can go, oh yeah, Revelation said that's what it was predicting. I built the argument last week that this book is not about that. In fact, when we try to manipulate this writing into a future-telling device, we actually run the risk of losing its meaning entirely. And what it would have meant to the audience back then, and then to be able to have the wisdom and discernment of what it means for us today. And so I just think that's the wrong approach. And I want to introduce, and I ended the video last week with talking about the way that I've gone about reading Revelation or understanding Revelation. And the genesis of this thought came to a point when years ago, my wife and I, we pastored a church called The Gathering, and we built just a wonderful community that are still, near and dear to our hearts even today. And one of my good friends that you're going to get to meet here in a few weeks, named Andrew, that was a weird way to say that. Hey, Andrew. He and his wife, Amber, they years ago wanted me to do a Bible study on Revelation. And for years and years and years, I resisted it. I just didn't like it because I always saw the abuse that came out of this writing and the way that pastors used it to instill fear, worry, anxiousness into people's hearts and minds because they used it as a way to, just drive the wrong message. And so I stayed away from it, partly because I didn't understand it myself, and also because of the ways that I saw it being misused from the stage. And so it just wasn't something I was even interested in. But they persisted and they convinced me. And so we, myself, my wife, them, a few others, we got together every week and we worked through this writing. And it was through that study and that exploration that I stumbled upon an idea that the writing of Revelation is, in fact, one giant chiasm. And so I worked hard and I wrote this commentary to explain that idea and map that idea out. And that work is what has become what I'm talking about today. And I've sat on it for years and years. I've shared it with a few people that I've allowed to kind of make some comments and ask questions about. And so it's been fun to see people respond to my thoughts on this. But that's what we're doing today. I'm sharing with you something that I've been sitting on for over a decade in my thoughts, and I'm now just bringing it to the world. So a couple notes I want to say before I dive in. So my introduction today is going to be the overview of the Apocalypse of John as a chiasm, and why I think those things are there. So I want to say this. First off, I'm actually not the first one to think of this, okay? So I'm not standing alone going, I'm the only one that's ever considered this. There's actually been theologians that have considered this in some form or capacity. I have not read them all. I was not aware of them when I began to put this thing that I'm going to show you here in a bit together. I wasn't aware that other scholars had done this. And so I am aware now, as I've looked into it, that there are scholars out there that argue some parts, maybe certain sections are chiastic literature, but I'm not aware of a scholar that has put it together in the way that I'm about to show you. And so if there is, I'm just not aware of it, and I would love for someone to share with me that content. And so I have a good friend, Tyler, who shared with me a podcast of a scholar that talks about Revelation as a chiasm. I haven't listened to that episode yet. That's on my radar for this week. But so there are those out there that say it. I don't know to what degree they say it, but they do exist. So I'm not here standing alone like, oh, I've got this brilliant idea. And then there are other scholars that completely disagree and think that that's stretching the text beyond what it's actually doing. And I think that's fair too, because it's important to understand that, just because you think it's a certain way doesn't mean that all people think it's a certain way. So I'm perfectly okay with pushback that I might get on this that might say, no, Joe, I don't think that's there, or maybe you're reading too much into it, or you're trying to force something that's not there. I completely understand that critique, and I'm open to it as well. As of now, this is how I see it. That's not to say that in a year that won't change as I continue to study, grow, and learn. And I think that's an important feature about learning the biblical text as a whole, is that we got to be careful not to stand on certainty, because when you do, that will erode very quickly under your feet the more you begin to learn and grow. If you stop learning and growing, then I guess certainty is just fine, because that you're limited to your own knowledge base or trusting someone else's knowledge base. But if you're someone who wants to grow, ask questions, which is what this channel is all about, then we gotta be humble enough to say, this is what I think now, and that might change given new information or things that I'm learning, or pushback from other people that are making good arguments and points about the subject we're talking about. So we just got to be okay with that, and I am. So whether or not this convinces you or is helpful to you, I'm not sure, but hopefully it is. Hopefully it is. Okay, so let's, for those that are listening that don't know what a chiasm is a literary device that is used both in Greek and Hebrew literature to essentially communicate a certain point. So this was used in Semitic languages. It was taken from Greek because we see it earliest in Greek literature, chiasms or chiastic literature, in poems that appear early in Greek literature. But in the Semitic languages of Hebrew, Aramaic, these literary devices begin to be used as a way to communicate information that have a certain point in a way that is memorable and could be retold. So in a lot of oral traditions, chiastic literature sayings are important because they're used to actually make it memorable, or a certain point about a story memorable. And so a quick Google search, you can research chiasm, chiastic literature, but it's found everywhere in the Hebrew Bible, also in the New Testament. The Jewish people, when they were writing, used it everywhere. Now, what's interesting is that chiasms are this device that kind of run like an ABBA structure. It's where you have a writing and it's told in a way that you have the end and the beginning and the end kind of match each other. Then the middle sections match each other. And then there's a center point that is actually the point of the story. And so I don't want to waste a lot of time talking about chiasm, so I just encourage you to go Google it. One thing to note, though, what's interesting is that scholarship on chiasms in the Bible is fairly recent and new. It wasn't something that was looked for in ancient times, or like a lot of church fathers don't talk about chiasms a whole lot. It's something that actually appears in modern scholarship that have found and discovered that this literary device is actually everywhere in the Hebrew Bible and also in the New Testament. And so if you have eyes to see, chiasms are there. This rhythm of ABBA, or point 1, point 1, point 1, 2, point 2, 2, point 2, 2, 1. Maybe. I don't know if that makes sense. I might have to cut that out. I say that to say this is what I think is happening with the writing of Revelation, the Apocalypse of John, as a whole. Not simply a chiasm within certain points, but I'm saying the entire writing has a chiastic structure to it. And I want to introduce that chiastic structure because I think that's the way that we ought to read and understand it. And so another reason why I think this is here, and again, I'll show you the graph here in a second, but we need to remember that John, whether it's John the Elder or John the Apostle, the disciple, what John, there are 3 theories of different Johns that exist in who wrote this, but this person was Jewish by descent. They would have been familiar with chiasms as a literary device. And if this letter was intended to be shared and across multiple different churches and cities, then it makes sense that this would have been something that would have been an important way to write it so that it would have been memorable. And we all know that this apocalypse is very memorable. It's very well talked about, and our imaginations go crazy when we read it. But so here's the premise, right? I think John, who was Jewish, and I'm okay with going John the disciple. I know that there's scholarship that would argue against that. I'm actually fine. I actually believe my point of view on this is that this is an earlier writing than what people give it credit. I used to teach that this was like the last thing that was written in the turn of the century, but I actually think it most likely can be dated earlier than that. I think that it was written by the disciple John, the apostle John, the one whom Jesus loved, John, the beloved. I think it was him that was exiled, who got this vision, came back inland, and then wrote it down for these churches. So I'm okay. That's my theory, because we don't actually know. And so him being thoroughly Jewish would have been familiar with this writing literary device, and I think he uses it to create this apocalypse, or to retell this apocalypse as a whole. Now, that's not to say that I don't think that this apocalypse is real, or that he didn't have a revelation, or that he just made it all up and then used this literary device. I think an event happened. I think a real event happened to him while he was exiled on the island of Patmos, just as he writes it. And then he comes home, and after he comes home, he writes this. And so he's taking the information that he got, he's thinking through it, he's organizing the thoughts in a way that can be shared with others, which then becomes this piece of writing. Okay, you're probably like, Joe, get what we're talking about here. Okay, so what I have printed out right here, you can see it right here, is a outline that I made for this chiastic structure. So I made this again over a decade ago, and I use color coordination to try to highlight and make this point. So this is what we're going to look at today. Now, if you want a copy of this, you can click the link in the show notes and get your own copy, this PDF version of this chiastic outline. I'll make this available on storiesoftove.com. There'll be a post on Tuesday that will go live that will have this as a PDF download as well. So you can look at this, make your own notes and scribbles on it, like we're doing today. But I encourage you to get the download yourself, look it over, see what fits in your own imagination as well. So I'm going to close that, and I'm going to set this aside, because what we're going to do is a little fun. I'm actually going to bring it up on my iPad. And what we're going to do is I'm going to put this up on the screen as well, so that you can see the markings that I'm making on this. So I've got on my iPad here, and I got it up on the screen. And what we have here is this chiastic outline that I've created, that, again, you can get for free. Download storiesoftove.com, or just go to the show notes. I'll have a link for it as well, so you can have your own. And we're going to make some markings on this. So what you have here is the full outline. So this is what I think is actually pretty brilliant. Oh my gosh, did I just call myself brilliant? I'm not brilliant. What I think is this writing is pretty brilliant, and why I think this fits. And I do take some leaps here, so just know that this is just my point of view. Okay, so what you have here, just right out of the gate, you can see that I've identified that there are these different sets of sevens. So you've got 7, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you've got the 7 right here, and these 7s actually map onto each other. Let's make this a little bit smaller. These 7s map onto each other. So if I were to take here, let's just back this out, and let's just start. If I were to take this 1 and this 7th idea, these are concepts and ideas that map onto this chiastic structure. So I've also got let's just change the color here for fun. If we take this number 2, oh, maybe I should do green, huh? Sorry guys, this is fun. So you've got this over here, right? And that sits together. And then you've got, if I go to blue here, so you can see the ideas that I think are working together. Now, what stands out here, I guess this should have been red, but what stands out here is this center section. Now, this is important when we're talking about the chiasms, is that you have these points that go together, and then the center point is the main point of the chiasm as a whole. So my argument is that this 7th portion, each of these 7s have 7s in them. Okay, so you can break up this chiastic outline in this way. So let's just go point 1. Has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? So we've got here this, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is the opening here. This first set of 7s, the 7 churches. How I outline this, though, is that that there's an introduction. So I have these moments in here where I go chapter 1, right here is this introduction piece, right? That sets up the structure of the writing as a whole. And you get these little divergence throughout this chiasm. So, but there is a pattern that I think is fascinating. And the pattern is that you can actually break up, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, then you have a break. There's a break in each of these, 5 or 4, 5, 6, 7. So you have all of these 7s. So you have 7 total sections that come together here. And you've got 7 sections of each of its individual sections. 7 sevens. Now, if you are someone who understands kind of the numerology, the importance of numerology in the biblical text, you know that 7 is a whole complete number. It was an important number to in Jewish literature and in the Jewish imagination, the number 7. So for me, I go, oh my gosh, this jumps out at me that there are 7 sections, and within each section, there are 7 sections. Like, is that a coincidence or is that intentional, right? The way I've outlined it, I think it's intentional. Okay, so let me just go in and erase some of this markings that I've done here. All right, so let's get out of here. And we're going to pull all of this back so we can look at a couple other things. Okay, so the 7 sevens. I think that's an important part of how this is structured. We'll get to the centerpiece in a second here. The what I think is in actually chapter 14. But there are other couple keynotes that I want to pull out in this chiasm here that I think are important. So again, you have the chapter 1, which is an introduction and a preface setting up the 7 churches. You've got in your chapter 4 here, you have this vision of God on the throne that then sets up the next set. Now, the 7 churches correlating to, right here, to the church. I think the seven churches is a setup at the end to talk about the church. Now, what's interesting about this, and what I have here is kind of this, like, this continues on, because I think the idea for John is that, and writing to these churches and all of this middle stuff here in between is a big setup for the churches to be the church, which is an ongoing reality. It is a thing that is going to happen going forward. So the idea here is that John is trying to communicate to these 7 churches something that he wants them to continue to remember forever, that this is a forever ongoing. So I have here my note that the idea here for John is all of this middle stuff that we'll get into here in the middle section is all about this. What kingdom are you going to choose? So he has these 7 churches here that he has critique and feedback for based off of the realities that they're facing in their day and at their time. And the challenges that they're facing over and over again is this reality of, and we talked about this in the last episode, that the question that they're facing is that, are they going to choose the way of Babylon or are they going to choose the way of New Jerusalem? The idea here is that there are 2 powers at play in the world, and John is fully aware of these powers. And one power is pulling you away from God's kingdom, and the other power is pushing you towards God's kingdom. And so one is called Babylon, and the other one is called New Jerusalem. And so these are these key themes that exist in this writing. And so my argument is that the first section set up here, you have Ephesus, to those who conquer, right? They eat from the tree of life. To those who conquer, they're not hurt by the second death. To those who conquer, new name are written on a stone. To those who conquer, be given the morning star. All of these are encouragements to these churches to be the people who conquer. To those who conquer, you're clothed in white. To those who conquer, the pillar, you're a pillar in the new temple. And to those who conquer, you'll reign with God. The idea here is the encouragement is that these churches, these 7 churches, are churches who conquer. And if you do, and not conquer in the sense of like worldly conquering, but conquering in the sense of the kingdom of God, which then gets worked out in this whole middle section here. So the idea here and the key theme, so I want to go back to the last section that's not directly identified in the chiasm. I think it's assumed, okay? And the assumption here is that John's trying to get these people to see, the seven churches, to wrestle with the question of what kingdom are you going to choose, right? Will you choose to conquer, be conquerors, or citizens of the fallen Babylon? Think about that for a second. Will you choose to be the conquerors that get the rewards that are identified here in this first section, or are you going to be participants in the fallen Babylon? So the revelation of history's pattern is this, is that all human kingdoms become Babylon and must be resisted. So sit with this idea for a second, because there's this thematic tone that needs to be presumed in the reading of the text. And it's this, that Jesus came to establish and to reveal his kingdom here on earth. That's what the Gospels are all about. If you want to know more about why the Gospels are these biographies of Jesus, go to, I have some videos about the kingdom of God, what that means. So go check out those videos. But the core thematic overview is that Jesus established a kingdom here on earth through his people, and expects that kingdom to continue to be, to continue to take ground. The way of Jesus is something that should move into the reality of the hearts and minds of all people everywhere. That's this go and make disciples calling, like that you get in the end of Matthew's gospel. And the challenge with that is that if God's kingdom is the real kingdom, then that means the kingdoms of this world are at risk of being exposed and defeated, or at least should be, right? That's the argument. It should be. And they're not. And so you have this power, this resistance to God's kingdom that we call Babylon, or at least the text identifies as Babylon. And the reality is that you had these early adopters of Christianity. They may not have even called Christianity at the time that this was written, but these early adopters to the way of Jesus, and they're being told that the way of Jesus is this kingdom come now and will soon come again, the reality of it. And so they begin to live differently. And as they begin to live differently, they are faced with challenges that they weren't ready for, right? So this idea of the persecution that came on the early church for the way that they became secluded from public life, which was in a way to challenge the deities of the day and the power structures of the day. And again, I have lots of videos on this that talk about the early church that you can go back and find. I'll link to a few of them, but that might be helpful. But the idea here that I want to make sure that we understand is that the apocalypse, the revelation of God's promise, is that Jesus will return to remove evil from this world and restore his true kingdom here on earth. Now, that's important. We believe that, right? Christians believe of the return of Jesus. And that's kind of why they look at Revelation to like, is it now? Is it now? The thing that this apocalypse is doing is trying to encourage its readers to remain faithful in the midst of a fallen Babylon world around them. And so this writing isn't something that's trying to have these all drop these little hints and clues. This apocalyptic literature is trying to reveal that in the midst of a fallen world that you're experiencing right now, Jesus is still on the throne, and that throne and kingdom will endure and will come. And it's to give hope to people who are looking around them saying that, no, there's no way that God's in control. Look at the brokenness in the world. Look what's happening to us as people who are following God. And can I trust it? And so this apocalyptic literature, this revelation that came to John, is a revealing and uncovering of the reality that Jesus is still on the throne, and that should give us hope. So whatever you're doing with this writing, This should not be something that scares you or gives you anxiety. And if it does, you're reading it wrong, because this would have been something that gave hope to people, not caused fear, worry, or concern. This would have been something that would have been encouraging to its readers, not something that's discouraging. And so how does that work, right? It's all about this jump from the first section to this last section about the church, the churches, and the church, and how that reality will move forward in the days to come. Will you trust that Jesus is on the throne, even though the world around you seems to be at odds with that, right? That's what this is doing. So how can I learn to trust that? Well, that's what this middle section is all about. And what I think is interesting here, there's a couple notes that you'll see. You move into this, you've got this chapter 4, and after chapter 4, this vision that he gets, you get seals and bowls, and you get 7 seals, and you get 7 seals. Let me just back that, and a group of 7 in the judgment in the kingdom. So here's what I think is interesting. In the first section of this part 2, you get the white horse, right? And it's just 3 verses. So you've got these like 3, 3, 3, 3, but you've got Jesus conquering on the white horse. But then over here in this next section of 19:11 through 22, you have Jesus again, and he's a rider on the white horse. So you have Jesus, or you have a white horse and a conquering rider, Jesus, and you have a rider on a white horse, Jesus, to conquer. So these 2 here map onto each other. Then you've got, this is crazy, then you've got a red horse that removes peace, that maps onto this 1,000-year reign of God's governing of peace. So do you see that they're at odds with each other? You have this black horse that's all about self-governance, right? The rule of man. Then you have this next section, the defeat of Satan, and peace is restored. So when self-governance takes place, this choosing to govern over self, it causes chaos. But when Jesus defeats the enemy, he restores peace. Then you have this pale horse, right? This green horse that's death. And you have the end of death. So what you have here in these sections, this first 4 section, is this kind of like back and forth that's taking place, a setup and a response to the setup. Then at the bottom, you have this cry out for justice section and new heaven and new earth, where there's no more tears, there's no more suffering. Like, do you see like this idea of this crying out, and there's no more tears? You have this cosmic upheaval, this reordering of creation that takes place in this section. And the response to that is a cosmic reordering with the New Jerusalem. You have the censer and the incense, which is the coming of Jesus and his power. And you have the ending here of the coming of Jesus in power. Each of these sections map onto each other, which makes sense for chiastic literature, right? Do you see the jumping over here that's taking place? There are these little breaks here that I find are interesting in the text, and you'll see them here in this little gap. And I've made little footnotes here that work onto each other, and I think these map onto the chiastic. So you have this intermission that takes place. I'm sorry, I'll go back like there. And that maps on to the intermission that happens in the green. You have the part 2 intermission, part 1 intermission, and these 2 map onto each other in the blue. I think that's a fascinating part of this. Okay, let's look at the blue section. So you have now this conversation of 7 trumpets and 7 bowls, right? So what's interesting about these bowls and trumpets, I actually think this is Exodus language. And what do I mean by that? When you think of judgment, which are these bowls and trumpets, it's all about this like judgment that's coming. The idea here is that what happens in a world that resists the way of God. And in the Jewish imagination, that would have been Exodus. And what I think is happening is that the part 3 and part 5, these intersections are a look back at Exodus the judgment that came on Egypt in Exodus. And so what I have here is you have these thirds that take place in this section. And so you got earth, you've got sea, you've got springs, and you've got light. And all of these can map onto the Exodus story here. And when you look at its associate over here, I don't know if that's right. You've got a third of earth, you've got earth. Again, Exodus. You've got sea, and you've got sea, Exodus. You've got springs, and you've got springs, Exodus. You've got light, and you've got light, Exodus. I think these are mapping onto each other. I think this is a part of the chiastic structure. You go over here to the you have a break, and then you go to the open pit, the Euphrates, and the temple. You've got the spirits, you've got army of destruction, you've got the day of the Lord. Again, I think these things are connected in the chiastic format. So it's very interesting that you've got the plagues of Egypt mapped into this, and I think John, in his way that he organized this vision, this apocalypse, he's revealing to us the reality of the oppression of Babylon. So Babylon and Egypt are kind of this synonymous way of looking at evil in the Hebrew Bible, and what happens when evil reigns. So in the story of Exodus, you have the oppression that's happening under Egypt and how God intervenes and steps in and deals with that to bring freedom and to release his people. So I think it makes sense that if you're a people group living under the thumb of the empire, and you're feeling discouraged that God's kingdom is nowhere to be found, that maybe you're like the Israelites calling out for help. And how does God respond to that? Well, it's through this judgment that takes place on empires that rule in ways that are antithetical to the kingdom of God. There's a huge airplane going over my house right now. I don't know if you can hear it, but it's super distracting. Okay, so you have this 3 and 5 section that, again, are these plagues of Egypt. Now we get to the middle section, which I think, again, when you're looking at chiastic literature, the middle section is the part that is like, okay, so then what's the point of all of this? And what you have almost, and it almost even maps into the actual literature itself. The center of Revelation is somewhere in between, depending on the text you have, is somewhere between 12 and chapter 12 and 14. And so you've got here, this is a really important section. So we're going to change a color to highlight that this is a really important section. This section 4, the middle section, because what you have here are these huge things that are taking place. You have a woman and a dragon, right? God's this reality of this conflict that's at play. You have the beast, who has military power. You have the beast number 2, who has economic power. There's this idea of dragon, the beasts who are in charge and ruling. And then at the end, we're gonna look at this middle section in a second. But then at the back end of this 7, you have the angel that's warning to worship God. I'm going to change this color because it's not really standing out the way I'd want. You have this angel 1, angel 2, and angel 3. And all of these angels are giving warnings about what's going to happen, right? So you have the beast, right, set up, and the dragon set up. Then you have this section we'll get to in a second. But at the end, you have this warning from this angel to worship God, that Babylon's going to fall, and you need to choose a side. So this section, the hope, is this. You have the Lamb, and this comes at the beginning of chapter 14, and you can read it, and it's this numeric value to the people who, this remnant that exists. Now, there's a lot of theory of what people think this numeric value is. I'll read it for you here. We'll go to chapter 14 here. I think it's worth reading. It says this in verse 1. So this is chapter 14, verse 1. It says, "Then I looked, And here was the Lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him were 144,000 who had his name and his Father's name written on their foreheads. I also heard a sound coming out of heaven like the sound of many waters and like the sound of a loud thunder. Now, the sound I heard was like that made by the harpist playing their harps, and they were singing a new song before the throne and before the four living creatures and the elders. No one was able to learn the song except for the 144,000 who had been redeemed from the earth. Now, that section right there, this conquering remnant, it goes on in verse 4. These are the ones who have not defiled themselves with the woman, for they are virgins. These are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These were redeemed from humanity at first fruits and to God and to the Lamb, and no lie was found on their lips. They are blameless. What I think John is identifying here, I know that there's some that like want to, is this the Jewish people? Who are this 144,000? Here's what I think is happening. Reading this from a chiastic structure, this group of people right in here, this group of people are the people who, let me just change that color. This group of people right here are the people who do what he wants these churches to do. It's these people when they live out in this section over here. So this middle section becomes the part that actually plays the role in the future of the church. So you have all of this conflict that's happening in this area. Let's switch again here. You have all of this conflict that exists. Let's see, what's a good color here? Let's choose here. I don't even know. Let's choose purple. Okay. You have all of this conflict in this middle section here that represents and resembles the reality of Babylon ruling and the response to Babylon ruling and what God's going to do with it. And those who remain, this middle section, this is the most important part, is the question, are you going to be that remnant? Are you the people, maybe talking to this church over here, are you the people that are going to be this in the midst of all that's happening here, so that, all this scribble, so that you can be this over here? This is what I think is happening in this chiasm. The most important part is this, and the question for you as the reader is, will you be people of the Lamb? Are you going to sit in the center here and answer this question? Are you going to be this? And you've got to wrestle with that. When you look at the world around you and the chaos around you, are you going to be people that resist Babylon because the reality is that this apocalyptic literature is trying to get you to see that Babylon isn't going to win. It's not going to win the day. What'll happen is that God's way, his kingdom, actually wins. It's a reversal of all of the things that we see in the world today, the power structures, those who want to take from others. That's what empires do. They take from you. And those who stay faithful to the kingdom of God are the people that will actually, in the end, be victorious. And so this is what I think is happening in this writing. This is the chiasm that I think exists in this writing. And so the question can be asked as we kind of wrap up this thought here, why I think this matters, reading it this way. Because there's so many people that I talk to that want to find like all of this stuff of like, oh, who's the Antichrist? What's the beast? Is he here? Is he there? And the reality is that every generation has an Antichrist. Every generation has a beast. And the question for you today is that, can you see that beasts are around you all the time? And the challenge for you is to resist it. It's not just, here's what, maybe unpopular thought, I don't know. I don't think it's one person. I think John, in this structure that I've shown you, is trying to see that the world that is ahead of us is a world that empires will rise and fall. And history has shown us that over and over again. And the question for you, as you're looking at this and you're looking at your world and you're looking at the current empires of our world today that want to oppress and to take from you, the question for you is that are you going to be a remnant that remains? Are you going to be the one who resists that empire, even though that empire is imposed on you? Will you be the one who goes, no, I'm going to follow the way of Jesus. I'm going to follow the way of the kingdom of God, which is to see the human in people, the way that God created people, and to love them accordingly. It's this way of resisting the temptation to grab and take for yourself. The one who is in first position but actually removes themselves to take the last position. It is the person who lowers themselves so that others can come to the top and that they can be successful. This is the way of the kingdom, and it is a reversal of the empires of our world today. And what the apocalypse is trying to do, and why I think the church has kept this as a part of its inspired text for so long, is because it's been something that's encouraged people, not discouraged them. It's been a piece of literature that it's like, oh, I can see how the power structures of our days are just like Egypt, wanting to take. And what will God do with that? In the end, God will make right what has gone wrong. And that is the hope for all of us and for every generation, is the hope and the belief that as I live today, the way that God is inviting me into his kingdom, his way on earth, the way that he modeled it, that we see in the biographies about him, is that the hope is that in the midst of all the chaos I see, I can continue to live God's way on God's earth, believing and trusting that one day God will make it all right in the end. So, that was a lot. I'm not sure if I'm going to go any more on this. I don't think there'll be a part 3, but you can download this and get your version of it. You can mark it up. I would love to hear your notes and feedback. Revelation, the Apocalypse of John as a chiasm, and see what comes out when you read it. And maybe I'm full of crap. I don't know. But that's how I see it. That's how I've written it up. I invite your thoughts and your feedback. I want to say thank you for watching. I know that the last video is a lot of people commented, and I appreciate that. And so here we go. Revelation as a chiasm. That's my thoughts. That's my idea. That's how I think we should read this writing to see what it's offering me, to give me hope in the midst of Babylon trying to conquer this world. How can I live faithfully for Jesus in the midst of it? That's what I think this is about. Revelation, the Apocalypse of John, is not about the future. It's about who's on the throne. Jesus remains on the throne, and our allegiance to him is what enables us to get through the world, the chaotic world that we see in front of us. That's the hope it's offering for us today. Download your own PDF version of this. And I just want to say thank you for watching another episode of Whiskey and Writings. And we will be back next week. Cheers.